Nothing gets the inner degenerate football fan in me going quite like picking all 256 NFL games before injuries inevitably occur and other teams make me look stupid. But nevertheless, I do it every year because it's a lot of fun. So from week 1 to Super Bowl 55, here it is. I'm breaking down each team by their strengths and weaknesses, giving you their win-loss predictions, and a whole lot more. 2020 is a leap year in the calendar, but can it even be a bigger leap year for Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals? All signs point to yes for his development because you get DeAndre Hopkins now to go along with Larry Fitzgerald in the slot and Christian Kirk, and it now means Kyler has one of the better wide receiver trios in all of football. And then by adding Kenyon Drake, it shows that Cliff Kingsbury, to his credit, can evolve to be something more than just an air raid play caller who loves to throw the football. The offensive line is a weakness, but a big reason why they allowed so many sacks is precisely because of Kyler Murray's backyard style of running around. Defensively, they reshaped their linebacker core by bringing in Devondre Campbell and drafting Isaiah Simmons out of Clemson, who's a uniquely talented hybrid player that should help the Cardinals be a whole lot better, stopping the run in a nickel defense. It is a really good pass rush with Chandler Jones, whose star power comes with help at that outside linebacker spot with fellow returner Hassan Reddick and a newly signed veteran in Devon Kennard, who started 65 games in 6 seasons. Now, they added Dre Kirkpatrick at corner to start opposite of Patrick Peterson as soon as Robert Alford suffered his season-ending pec injury. And what you have now is a popular pick for some to go from worst to first. But I don't think this offensive line is going to be good enough in a division with ferocious defensive linemen. This to me looks like an almost team, the type of team that makes it tough on contenders but keeps the bad teams around too long. A weak schedule to start off means they start off 3-1, but as things get tougher, the losses pile up and they finish 6-10 in last place. But as Kyler Murray continues to develop into an upper echelon quarterback, signs are good in Arizona. Now up north in the division, you have the Seattle Seahawks. The biggest move of Seattle's offseason was making that trade for Jamal Adams to join a defense that already includes Bobby Wagner, a linebacker. Now, Adams will be helpful in the back end, but he might be needed more up front as a blitzer and a run stopper because last year the Seahawks could not stop the run or get to opposing quarterbacks. I remember playing 5-star recruit Rasheem Green back in the Mission League in high school, and now he is coming along in his development as a pro for the Hawks, but the fact that his 4 sacks were enough to lead the team last year is not a good sign for the Seattle team at all. And the extent to which Seattle improved on that front 7 is far from eye-popping as well. They didn't pick up Ngakoue, Robert Quinn, or Dante Fowler in free agency, and then they didn't bring back Jadeveon Clowney. So instead, it'll be up to a group featuring recent draft picks in Darrell Taylor and Alton Robinson and a pair of former Seahawks in Bruce Irvin and Benson Mayowa having a Seattle reunion. Now, the only thing is, those two aren't coming back to a Legion of Boom defense. The offense is what carries the Seahawks these days. In their backs, though, I will say this, they're stacked. Chris Carson quietly finished in the top 5 in rushing yards in the last 2 seasons, and he'll have Carlos Hyde as a backfield running mate to provide solid insurance for the injured Rashad Penny, who is almost done recovering from that torn ACL. The only thing is, they'll be running behind an offensive line that might struggle out of the gate due to a lack of continuity. They're going to have to lean on Dwayne Brown and Mike Iupati to hold that unit down because reshaping an offensive line is tough during a year without a preseason, and this was also a team that was expecting Chance Warmack to play left guard until he opted out because of COVID. Also gone, DJ Fluker. He's being replaced at right guard by a rookie 3rd rounder. And then they brought in BJ Finney to replace Justin Britt at center, but Finney was so bad in camp that the Hawks have still been working out Justin Britt just in case they need to bring him back. Now, the good news is for Seattle, you got Russell Wilson. He's like that piece of flex tape that you slap on a leaky bucket of water trying to fix everything. And more can be expected out of DK Metcalf in year 2 next to Tyler Lockett. No division games until after the bye. That could be a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it is more of a good thing for Seattle. I see them losing to Arizona and Dallas before their Week 6 bye, and then after that, they drop 2 games to Buffalo and Philly, split the series against the Niners and Rams on their way to a 10-6 third-place finish that can still secure them a playoff spot in an expanded playoffs. Now, also looking to get back into the postseason are Sean McVay's Los Angeles Rams, and in his 3rd year as head coach, it was only his first time not winning the division or making the playoffs. 2020 brings a lot of new changes. You got a new stadium, new uniforms, new logos, and most importantly, new faces replacing familiar faces. No more Todd Gurley has people wondering what to make of this backfield. And as much as it sounds like running back by committee, I think second-round pick Cam Akers is going to be a dude, and he's going to eventually become that guy who takes the majority of the touches, though there is potential of him getting vultured in short yardage situations by veteran back Malcolm Brown or undrafted rookie Xavier Jones, while Darrell Henderson, the third-round pick from last year, heals from that hamstring injury that he just recently got. So that run game, super important because it dictates how the Rams love to throw the football, which is out of that play-action scheme that closely resembles their zone running plays out of those condensed formations. And, dude, they get those receivers involved in the blocking, too. And speaking of receivers, that is definitely a strength of this team with Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and then now new rookie Van Jefferson. He's been the talk of Rams camp for his football IQ and ability to get open. Over on the other side of the ball, it's an athletic defense. You got two elite players that power it all, Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, who, by the way, Ramsey just got paid big-time money to stay in LA with AD and the Rams long-term, which has got to be something exciting for Rams fans. One of their other offseason moves to help out Aaron Donald was bringing in defensive lineman A'Shawn Robinson, who unfortunately is one of two players to start the season off on the non-football injury list, along with recently drafted outside linebacker Terrell Lewis. They're going to miss Corey Littleton at inside backer, and the lack of depth at that position does leave some reason to be concerned. So what they went to the waiver wire to claim Denver's Justin Hollins to shore up the depth. And speaking of Denver, the team's new defensive coordinator is Brandon Staley, who worked in Denver under Vic Fangio. And if Staley's scheme looks anything like Fangio's, it probably means the Rams will be in a lot of nickel and dime packages. Hence why they did load up at their safety position, which is another strength of this team. And I think that's going to in turn alleviate some of the pressure off the middle of the field. Overall, I think this defense will be in the top 13 in most statistics when it's all said and done. I think they start off with two big wins against the NFC East, two best teams, drop a road game to Buffalo, and then rattle off two wins before losing their first game to the Niners. Now, the only problem is their second crack at Jimmy G and the Niners comes on a short week, which is why I actually am predicting the Niners to winning that one as well. I see the Rams losing on the road to Tampa on that Monday Night Football game, and then probably splitting home games with Seattle to be good enough, though, to finish at 11-5, which is solid in this division. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, like, come on, man, really? That's ambitious. But just think about it like this. This team marched down the field in Seattle last year with a chance to win a tough primetime game, and then if a kick goes inches the other way, last year's 9-7 becomes 10-6. But here's the thing, though. If things do come down to a kick, it's not going to be Greg Zuerlein anymore because now they've got a rookie in Sam Sloman. Despite all the losses, this is still a very talented football team in Los Angeles with a really good head coach and a quarterback who is only getting more comfortable in that offensive system. Now, the NFC West is a tough division, and the thing is, until further notice, the Niners, they're the best team in this division. They battled through injuries last year, but still found themselves winning the division in Seattle, using their first-round bye to get them all the way to a fourth-quarter lead in the Super Bowl, but they just couldn't get it done. So after that now, the question becomes, can the Niners avoid a Super Bowl hangover? And to me, there's absolutely no doubt this team is up for that challenge. Even though you go into games knowing what San Francisco's identity is, you still have to stop it, and head coach Kyle Shanahan gets creative with it week to week. They've got an efficient dink and dunk passing game that works because of how dominant the team is rotating backs over on the ground, and then they're running behind a monster fullback in Kyle Juszczyk. Credit to John Lynch for being an awesome GM. He found a really good wideout in Deebo Samuel, who towards the second half of his rookie season really started to dominate out there. He's been rushing, and catching the ball really well, but the thing is, he's got a broken foot that he's been nursing this whole time, so I don't know if he'll be ready to go for the start of the season at full speed, but we'll have to see on that. Then losing Emmanuel Sanders to the Saints is why they took Brandon Ayuk in the first round to help replenish that mediocre wideout group. But the thing is, their best pass catcher isn't even a wideout. It's a guy who also moonlights as the best blocking tight end in all of football. George Kittle, make no mistake, the heart and soul of this 49er offense. And joining him now is the newly signed Jordan Reed, who's looked great in camp and has always been an extremely talented tight end. It's just he's never been able to play a full 16 games. But if he stays healthy, Kyle Shanahan and the 49er offense can be fully operative and dominant in 2 tight end personnel sets to go along with their pretty talented offensive line. Now, the thing is, we're going to have to see if their line will be as good as they were last year. You know, they did lose lifelong 49er Joe Staley to retirement, but Trent Williams is, younger, faster, more fresh, so I don't really see how they skip a beat at that tackle position. They may, however, struggle early in the interior because their 2 top centers went down with an injury. Defensively, it's a good football team, so I'm not really worried about there. If you're a Niner fan, I don't think you should be worried either. There is no more DeForest Buckner, though. The thing is, they have an embarrassment of riches at that defensive line with Dee Ford, Eric Armstead, and then last year's Defensive Rookie of the Year in Nick Bosa. And then by drafting Javon Kinlaw, it just tells me they're going to be fine at that position. So with all those players, tons of them worth mentioning that I didn't even get around to naming, they make Rob Saleh's job as defensive coordinator really easy. And it was San Francisco and Green Bay who last year were the teams in the NFC that were knocking on the door of a Super Bowl win. But in my eyes, Green Bay, they didn't really do anything to better themselves where they needed it, and the 49ers absolutely have. Now, the NFC West is not going to be any easier than it was last year, but again, I think this is a Niner team that looks like they're going to avoid a Super Bowl hangover. I've got them going 12-4, with all 4 of their losses, though, coming on the road. I see them losing to Seattle in Week 8, New Orleans in Week 10, Dallas on Sunday night in Week 15, and losing a game to Kyler's inspired Cardinals in Week 16. But it should be enough to win the division and clinch a top 2 seed. Only thing is, there are no buys for 2 seeds anymore, so that game against the Saints, it's going to be huge. And as we move on to the NFC South, let's talk about those Carolina Panthers. They're going to look a lot different when they take the field in Week 1. Very unfortunate that the Cam Newton era had to come to an end in such a bitter way. But here we are. New head coach Matt Rule's got a new quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater, and the fit makes sense given that Teddy has a connection with new offensive coordinator Joe Brady from their days together back in New Orleans. Gone also is Luke Kuechly, who was the heart and soul of that Carolina locker room and defense. Greg Olsen, Dontari Poe, Gerald McCoy, all gone as well. So as far as familiar faces go, it's pretty much just Christian McCaffrey. The guy joined some elite company last year, posting 1,000 yards as both a receiver and a runner, which was good enough for him to be comfortably winning that Offensive Player of the Year award last year. So with $64 million guaranteed in the bank through 2025, it's going to be up to Carolina to figure out how to effectively use him without overusing him, which it's going to be tough because McCaffrey really much, as far as production goes, that's their guy. They didn't have that great of an offensive line last year, which is not a good thing at all, but we'll have to see what this year brings. 3 of the linemen from last year's group are gone, so maybe a fresh unit is what is needed, but bringing in Russell Okung at tackle does come at the expense of losing Trey Turner, the longtime guard, who was the offensive lineman that they probably had as their number 1 guy last year. They're strong at that linebacker spot and have a pretty deep receiving core for Teddy to throw to, but this is still obviously the Christian McCaffrey show. Defensively, bad last year because they couldn't stop the run, but they literally spent every single draft pick on the defensive side of the ball, so maybe we'll see some improvements there. To me, though, this looks like a team in rebuilding mode, capable of competing with division opponents and sneaking up on some average teams, but I do have them going 3-13 with some sneaky wins on the road against the Chargers and Falcons, and a 1 win that I would say in Week 11 comes against the Detroit Lions. So 3-13 for the Carolina Panthers. Now, it will be interesting to see what the Atlanta Falcons have in store after very high hopes in 2019 fell apart last year due to injuries. Last year, Atlanta jumped out the gate 1-7. Desperately needed to do some things to fix that, but then finished 6-2 to save Dan Quinn's head coaching job. And now the question becomes again, is Dan Quinn going to survive the season, and will he be the head coach at the start of next season? Because his hot seat is definitely burning, and while he's no longer calling defensive plays for his team, there will still be a ton of pressure on him to take that unit to a whole nother level. Now, speaking of pressure, they had the second fewest sacks last year, so in comes Dante Fowler Jr. from the Rams to help out in a big way, and they're also hoping that Takk McKinley can show some more promise in year number 4. Losing Desmond Trufant is a big blow to the secondary that was already struggling. So then, A.J. Terrell was drafted in the first round to help revamp that part of the defense. So it'll be him and Isaiah Oliver starting on the outside at corner, and then Darqueze Dennard as the primary nickel for the Falcons. The strength of the team, though, obviously the offensive side of the ball. We knew that. Julio Jones, a monster. It's him, Calvin Ridley. That's a really good running mate. No more Austin Hooper, so in comes Hayden Hurst at tight end. And then now, Todd Gurley is back in Georgia playing football on what is the ultimate mystery signing. He is going to be this team's number 1 back, but this workload that he's going to have this year is going to be a whole lot less than what it was during his years in LA. Now, he'll have a potentially juicy role as a red zone scoring threat in Atlanta's pass-heavy offense. Now, if he can see 15 and 25 touches per game, this signing is definitely a win. The Falcons tied for the 5th toughest schedule, not going to make things easy. And look, this makes sense that their schedule is as tough as it is because look, Tom Brady's Bucs. NFC South has got the perennial contending New Orleans Saints every year making it tough on other teams. So I do think these Falcons have all the makings of a talented team that just ends up at an 8-8 spot. And in a year with even 7 playoff spots, I don't think that's enough for a spot in the playoffs. So it almost certainly probably ends up with Dan Quinn out of a head coaching job. Now, skipping over to Florida, it's a new era in Tampa Bay, or I guess a place which is now being called Tampa Brady because of a trademark I guess Tom did. So it's going to be weird, though, seeing him throw passes for somebody else other than the Patriots. But, all right, I guess let's roll. It's 2020. Why not? He steps into an offense that was number 1 in passing last year, but that doesn't really mean anything because him and Jameis, completely different quarterbacks. You won't see 30 interceptions from Tom like he did with Jameis, and Tom's offense is not going to be that same downfield team that Jameis made it because with a weaker arm at 43, Tom just doesn't push the ball down the field like he used to. But I would still expect some very efficient numbers from Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, who might be the number 1 wide receiver duo in all of football. And then we all know Tom Brady, this guy likes to throw to his tight ends. And now your buddy Gronk comes out of wrestling and TV, out of retirement to join his buddy in Florida. So I'm not sure how good he's going to be, but all I know is this. Dude is a first ballot Hall of Famer, and a tight end room with him, O.J. Howard, and Cameron Brate, it's going to make Tom Brady's job easy up the seams and in the red zone. Now the O-line, not all that great. They did in fact give up a lot of sacks last year, but some of that changes with Brady coming in and making the releases out of his hands a whole lot quicker than what Jameis did, holding on to the football, taking sacks, and making life miserable for the Buccaneers. They're going to have to start a rookie tackle in Tristan Wirfs from Iowa, but the team really likes him as a blue-chip prospect capable of contributing on day 1. Now in the backfield, an interesting group. Leonard Fournette comes in as a late addition to a group that already has Ronald Jones, LaShawn McCoy, and then draft pick Keyshawn Vaughn. I do see a big jump coming from the other side of the ball, too. Shaquille Barrett, obviously, last year, a dominant force, led the league in sacks, and now he's back on a franchise tag, playing on a defensive line that brings back Jason Pierre-Paul and Ndamukong Suh in free agency. So those guys, plus they're really good at stopping the run with Levante David and 22-year-old Devin White, who was actually named a captain this year after a great rookie season. So with all that, it's easy to make this team to pick the division, right? I'm not ready to do that, though. I think this is a good team. I think they're a wildcard team that becomes even more dangerous when they get in the playoffs with a guy in Tom Brady who's been there and done that millions of times. Now, looking at their schedule, I think they split division games with the Saints and Falcons, lose to the Vikings, Bears, and Packers. They could easily lose that Monday night road game against the Giants because New York is going to be coming off a Thursday night game with extra time to prepare and get down for a big win. So I do think, though, with key wins over the Rams and Chiefs, Tom's probably got the Bucs at like 10-6 as a 7 seed in those newly formatted playoffs, where all it takes is 60 minutes of good playoff football to make something happen, and I don't know, maybe go on a Super Bowl run. But for all the talk about Brady, though, let's not forget that the Saints are winners of 3 straight NFC South titles and 2 straight seasons of 13 wins. So once again, this is a team that's probably the most stacked team in the NFC. That roster is better than anybody else's, and it's part of a consistent theme that in the past few years, let's be real, hasn't helped them get over the hump. But does that change this year? Or is it even harder now in an NFC South division that features a rejuvenated Falcons team and Tom Brady in Tampa Bay? Well, for as far as the Saints are, they're really stacked. The thing is, they got even more stacked at some of the positions they were already really good at. It was hard enough stopping Michael Thomas last year, and then that was with Ted Ginn Jr. as his teammate. So good luck now when you swap Ted Ginn for an even better wideout in Emmanuel Sanders. Now, the object of football, it's to protect your quarterback and get the other team's quarterback. And when you look at the Saints, they do both of those things really well. Tied for the third fewest sacks last year and had the third most sacks of the opposing quarterback. They shuffled up the secondary a bit. Malcolm Jenkins comes in to replace Von Bell. Should make them better at safety. And then Marshawn Lattimore, an absolute beast at corner, but as good as he is, he can't play on two sides at once. And the opposite corner slot, it's been a revolving door. Now Eli Apple's gone, which is good for them. And instead, Janoris Jenkins will be back, who's been a good player, but again, shown some inconsistency as well. Kiko Alonso starts the season off on PUP, but new to the team this year is Nigel Bradham, who is an experienced and instinctual player who thrives in coverage at that linebacker spot. His only knock is that he's not as solid against the run as Alonso is. And I look at this team, look, their schedule's not really that difficult. I got them beating Tampa Bay in their opener, losing to the Raiders in their Vegas debut, but then rattling off 5 straight wins until they lose to Tampa Bay in the rematch. Now, a key Week 10 win against the Niners would be absolutely huge for their potential playoff seeding implications. But even with the road loss to Atlanta and a loss to the defending Super Bowl champions, I still have New Orleans ending up like 12-4 and in first place in an NFC South division. Now, that makes it 4 straight years, with soon-to-be 42-year-old quarterback Drew Brees in his 20th and final season preaching the motto Super Bowl or bust because, look, you're all in on this year for the Saints, and I don't know what you got left in years to come because this is it for Drew Brees. Now, it's easy to get spoiled over division titles when they come all the time, but that's not the case if you're a Lions fan. Since moving to the NFC North, they've yet to win a division title, and they're looking for their first trip to the playoffs since 2016. Now, it certainly helps that Matt Stafford is back because he was killing it on offense last year. They were averaging 391 yards per game up until he got hurt with that season-ending injury. Now, he's got 2 really good playmaking wideouts in Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay. He's hoping for a big breakout sophomore year from tight end TJ Hawkinson. They drafted DeAndre Swift with the second-round pick to help their running game, but he's banged up to start the season, so they signed Adrian Peterson as an insurance policy to go along with Kerryon Johnson. But whoever ends up running the football might have to find a lot of their own running lanes because the way Detroit blocks up front, the offensive line, young pieces who definitely need some time to gel. They brought in Big V from Philadelphia on a big contract, but I mean, you watch him play, he's not the most polished offensive tackle in the game, so little reason to be kind of a bit concerned that maybe he's overpaid. The defense, an influx of new talent comes in with Jamie Collins, Deron Harmon, and Danny Shelton from New England's #1 defense last year, and they're going to be leaning heavily on first-round pick Jeff Okudah on day one to just take over at corner for a team that traded Darius Slay. Hopefully those moves, though, can help Trey Flowers generate some more pressure off of the edge, which as of now, edge rushing, that's a weakness for this team as well. Detroit, I would say a live dog to win in an evenly matched division if all goes right. I just don't see it happening, and primarily because I think they start off slow with 3 losses in their first 4 games until they go back and forth between winning and losing games until that season finale. And if that's the case, Matt Patricia could find himself out of a job, and the way I see it, 7-9 is likelier than the division title for the Detroit Lions. Now over in Chicago, fans are tired of the wind. All they want is wins. Bears finished 8-8 during a season with much higher expectations than what they ended up getting. This was a great defense who finished in the top 10 in just about everything, headlined by their 4th best scoring defense. They dominated on defense even though their freakishly talented weapon Khalil Mack only put up 8.5 sacks, which is really modest for his standards. But then they go and add Robert Quinn, they bolster their solid defense, and if you have a healthy Akeem Hicks to go along with Roquan Smith, I don't think you should be concerned at all if you're a Bears fan. The question is just going to be on offense, and that pressure is a lot of what's going to be on the quarterback to play just good enough to kind of get things done. Trubisky's got the job for now, but he might be on a short leash if the Bears come out of the gate struggling to throw the football, because I'm sure Bears front office and coaches value their jobs enough to know that their jobs are on the line. I do think Matt Nagy, that head coach, he puts Mitch Trubisky in the best possible position to succeed week in and week out. But the thing is, the gimmicks only take you so far, and you do have Nick Foles in your back pocket if you got to go to him. Now, the Bears, they're going to have to find ways to become more explosive on offense, because last year they were 30th in the number of carries that went for more than 20 yards. And it's one of the reasons the Bears are handcuffed to being a good but not great football team. Now, all 4 NFC North teams have their own unique flaws, so they can all beat up on each other a bit. And luckily for the Bears, their first 6 games are against teams with losing records in 2019. And I do see them going 4-2 to start off, which is good, including an impressive win over Tampa Bay. But then the losses kind of start to pile up. Lose to the Rams and Saints, drop 2 games to both the Vikings and Packers. And this team ends up right where they were last year, at 8-8, and on the couch during the playoffs, figuring out what they're going to do at quarterback moving forward. Now, the NFC North team most familiar with playoff runs and with the most stability at quarterback in the last 10 years has been the Green Bay Packers. And in 2019, they definitely overachieved, finishing just 1 win away from a Super Bowl trip. But this is a team in win-now mode that didn't make any significant upgrades to the spots they needed. Experts have been calling the 2020 wide receiver draft class the deepest of all time, so tell me, how is it that the Packers managed to leave that draft without taking a single one of them to help out an inexperienced group that relies way too heavily on Devontae Adams? And to make things worse, at receiver, Devin Funchess opted out for the season, so you're really looking at a barren group for Aaron Rodgers to throw to. And oh, by the way, you let go of Jimmy Graham, who was, getting older, but still a red zone threat who helped out in the middle of the field. And then what did the Packers do instead? They took Utah State quarterback Jordan Love with their first-round pick, and he's going into the season as a third-string quarterback. We did know that he was raw, but it still looks like Aaron is on his way to getting the full treatment that he got Brett Favre with over when he was a rookie. So Rodgers, is he looking over his shoulder with Jordan Love being the new guy? I think probably. We don't know about the future. Now, Rodgers was able to get more help from Aaron Jones in the Green Bay running game, but Brian Bulaga's departure creates an area of concern at right tackle because Wagner, that's a significant downgrade. Defensively, their run defense also didn't improve in the offseason, so they said goodbye to Blake Martinez, and that doesn't help either. I would say the defense does have some good duos with Zendarius and Preston Smith rushing the passer, and then with Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage at safety. But overall, not really pleased with Green Bay's lack of moves they made. They say insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But don't worry, because even though Green Bay is doing the same thing over again, there will definitely be different results this time. Only it's going to end up with the Packers being 8-8 and uncharacteristically out of the playoffs even with a healthy Aaron Rodgers, which is not good for a Packers fan. Now, even though the Packers are the reigning NFC North champions, you can bet your last dollar that the Minnesota Vikings will be right there with them all year long. Now, Kirk Cousins surprised many with his productivity last year. The question just now becomes, can he follow it up with Stephon Diggs now in Buffalo? And it's going to be tough, but at least Captain Kirk can rely on his solid connection with Adam Thielen to carry that group for a while as rookie first-round pick Justin Jefferson out of LSU adjusts to his new role as a number 2 wideout. Now, Gary Kubiak takes over as the offensive coordinator for a team that runs the football extremely well with Dalvin Cook, but they do have some positions on the offensive line that are some question marks, in particular at offensive guard. Now, defensively, the Vikings have always been strong under Mike Zimmer, but there's a lot of changes going on in that secondary. Gone are veteran corners like Trey Waynes, Mackenzie Alexander, and Xavier Rhodes. And the Vikings are turning to a pair of rookies in Jeff Gladney and Cameron Dantzler to start on day one in a completely reshaped secondary, which is going to be tough, and without preseason live reps, this is going to be hard for those guys to come along quite fast. So those young guys will fortunately be able to still lean on help from veteran safeties. Even as he gets older, Harrison Smith is still holding it down with the black half sleeves in the back end. He's making plays all over the field even at his age. So good there for the corners. They'll be able to rely on him. And then trading for Yannick Ngakoue shows the Vikings are absolutely serious about rushing the passer. And you could argue that Ngakoue and Daniil Hunter, they might be the best rushing duo in the game. But they'll be without Hunter for at least 3 weeks now that he's on IR. And when you consider the fact that Green Bay didn't do much to get better, I think the Vikings have the best chance of representing this division in the playoffs. 4 of their first 5 games are against playoff teams, though, so that's why I see them going 2-3 to start. But then from there, look out, because at that point, I think Justin Jefferson will have adjusted to NFL game speed as he becomes a viable number 2 option, even as a rookie wideout. I see 8 wins in their next 9 games, stumbling just once at home to Dallas in Week 11, and then with 2 road games to end the year, a Friday night loss on Christmas Day to the Saints, followed by a loss to the Lions to finish 10-6, but again, in that number 1 spot in the NFC North. Now, a winning season is something that the fans in Washington haven't seen since 2016. But anybody hoping to see one in 2020 must not be paying attention at all, because Daniel Snyder's organization has been a giant mess, and it's a franchise looking to move forward with a new identity. But as uncertainty of a new team name and a rebrand lingers, there is 100% certainty that when the Washington football team is going to hit the field, they're going to struggle. I mean, there's no denying it. Now, good news is Ron Rivera takes over for Jay Gruden in the role as head coach, which is an important step in the growth for this franchise. I do think if there is a right guy for this job, it's absolutely him. But unfortunately, now he's dealing with health issues, so he might be in and out of the facility as he treats his cancer. And running the football was set to be one of this team's strengths, but now the team has cut ties with Darius Geis for off-the-field issues, and then they released Adrian Peterson. So maybe that's a show of confidence in their young guys, but either way, this is a very inexperienced group that's forced to run behind a disastrous offensive line. They don't have Donald Penn anymore, and then they finally ended the unhappiness of longtime star tackle Trent Williams by trading him to the Niners. It doesn't help. They also have the weakest tight end group in the NFL, which makes things way worse on offense. The coolest thing, though, is for that offense in the offseason, now the coolest story is that Alex Smith's road to recovery has landed him back on the team after a devastating leg injury nearly took his life. But he's not going to be the starter. That role, it does belong to Dwayne Haskins for the moment, but the cupboard is really bare for him to create his own success, and if Washington loses a bunch of football games as expected, the possibility of drafting his replacement becomes a likelier scenario. Now, the lone bright spot on offense might be that wide receiver Terry McLaurin had a breakout rookie season and looks like a guy worth keeping around during a rebuild. And then the difference is the defense, and that could be a different story for this team. Washington is strong up front on the defensive line, and number 2 overall pick Chase Young is in a position to be a force from day one and potentially win Rookie of the Year with double-digit sacks. I got him doing that exactly. Now, that's just about all there is to look forward to with Washington, because there's no way they win more than 5 games. I see them winning 3, all of them being at home, 1 against the Giants, 1 against the rebuilding Bengals, and then I'll give them 1 revenge win for Ron Rivera against his former Panthers, which means it's a repeat 3-13 season for the Washington football team to put them in last place in the NFC East once again, looking for a new name, a new identity, and maybe even a new quarterback in the next season. This is a division that has a lot of other coaches that are now coming in, and one of those is in New York. They've got themselves another Judge besides Aaron now. Head coach Joe Judge looking to change the culture in a turnaround season with second-year quarterback in Daniel Jones, who now has his first full offseason as a starter under his belt. So Judge, a ton of experienced assistants around him might make things easier for that rebuild. The Giants plucked former Cowboys coach Jason Garrett from the unemployment line to call the plays on offense, and he has an Ezekiel Elliott-type player to work with now that Saquon Barkley is his new running back. And then Saquon, he's a guy 4.6 yards per carry, continuing to show us that he's a generational talent, but let's just hope that it doesn't go to waste. Now, this team's strengths, they are with running the football and stopping the run on defense, and Blake Martinez should only help in that area. The defensive concerns lie with their inability to generate edge pressure. It was a problem last year that needs to be fixed for the sake of a secondary that finished towards the bottom of the league in passing yards allowed. Now, the Giants addressed their secondary concerns by drafting Xavier McKinney at safety out of Alabama in the second round, but he's undergoing surgery for a fracture in his foot that will keep him out. And then they drafted DeAndre Baker last year to steal passes from quarterbacks, not to steal things with a firearm. Now, more will be expected from rookie cornerback Darnay Holmes, who, fortunately for the Giants, has been the talk of camp. And personally, I've watched him in person for years, from Pop Warner through high school and college, And all I'm just going to say is this: I'm not going to be shocked if he balls out this year. It's not even an if. I think it's going to be when. And then elsewhere at corner, the Giants gave James Bradberry a 3-year, $43.5 million contract after 4 solid but not elite seasons in Carolina. They will be leaning on him and Logan Ryan, who they just signed just before the start of the season. So honestly, I think that secondary unit will be all right as it is. I do sense some early struggles in an 0-4 start, but from there I see them finishing 6-6 with 1 win against each of their NFC East opponents. Beating the Bucs at home on Monday night with 10 days rest is something I see happening too. So 6-10 is my prediction for the New York Giants in 2020. And unlike New York, Washington, and Dallas, the Eagles are the only team in this division that didn't go into a pandemic-stricken season with a new head coach. Philly was an extremely talented but beat-up football team last year that limped its way through the end of the season with 4 straight wins past the dysfunctional Cowboys to get them ahead in the NFC East and get that title with a 9-7 record. But the NFC East was the NFC least last year, and will that be the case this year? Well, we'll have to see. Jason Peters was not in the plans for the Eagles in 2020, but the injury bug seems to have caught up to this team again on the offensive line. So a pair of season-ending injuries to guard Brandon Brooks and tackle Andre Dillard means that Peters will go from being brought back to play the role of a veteran guard to once again being this team's left tackle on short notice. And now with a surprise move, the team drafted Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round to serve as the backup quarterback. And that is obviously a testament to Carson Wentz's relative inability to stay healthy. But if he does stay healthy, Carson will have once again probably the best tight end duo in the league with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. His receivers are all right. Hopefully Deshaun Jackson can stay healthy to be the burner over the top, and Jalen Reagor was drafted to replace Nelson Aguilar. And this team felt confident enough with Miles Sanders as the feature back to let go of Jordan Howard. Now on the opposite side of the ball, Jim Schwartz's defense is built around the defensive tackle position, and with 5 straight Pro Bowls to his name, Fletcher Cox anchors a unit. He's got 2 other beasts in Javon Hargrave and a healthy Malik Jackson. Rotating those 3 on the field could help the edge a lot, which, the edge I would say has less depth and more age and injury concerns. You got Brandon Graham entering his 11th season, coming off a year with 8.5 sacks. And the other starter is the often injured 24-year-old Derek Barnett, whose injuries have been in the way of his first-round pick potential since 2017. But then after those 2, the names shouldn't really scare anybody. And then the secondary, last year, god-awful, but now you add big play Darius Slay, and then Nickel Roby-Coleman on a bargain 1-year deal to hold it down as a top 5 slot corner. And I think that means they go 3-3 in their first 6 games with wins over Washington and Cincy and Pittsburgh. Their 3 losses being, I think, to the Rams, Niners, and Ravens. But from there, I see them going on a nice 6-game winning streak to keep pace with Dallas. But then a tough loss to New Orleans is followed by devastating road losses to Arizona and then Dallas that make a Week 17 win against Washington possibly important, but in the end meaningless. I really wanted to pick this team to win more games than they did last year, but I have them going 9-7 again, which this time around means 2nd in the division, and I think the offensive line injuries are probably going to be a reason for that. And trust me, when I say this, nothing I'd rather be than wrong when it comes to this pick, but it's going to come down to how healthy the Eagles can stay and if they can take care of business in their division games. Now, it is clearly the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles at the top of this division. The question of who wins the division definitely depends on a lot of things like health, but coaching is one of them. Now, with only 2 postseason wins in his 9.5 seasons with the team, it was definitely time for Jason Garrett to go. So they do bring in a non-nonsense guy in Mike McCarthy to change this team from their old ways. But, out with the old, they do keep some of the old with Kellen Moore sticking around, and for good reasons too. The Cowboys put up the most total yards and 2nd highest passing yards in an offense that was very heavy in 11 personnel with 1 running back, 1 tight end, and 3 receivers. Kellen Moore's already got a solid relationship with Dak, which is why I think those who wanted Lincoln Riley to leave Oklahoma for the pros to be the next Cowboys head coach and, de facto play caller as well, I thought they were being short-sighted. But, if you wanted something from Oklahoma, the Cowboys did go grab somebody there with CeeDee Lamb replacing Randall Cobb at a fraction of the cost, with even more speed and potential because he had a great season last year with Oklahoma in college, and he should mesh really nicely with those two other 1,000-yard receivers and Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. Now those three, they're going to be forcing a ton of teams to be playing in nickel packages, which should make things a lot easier for Ezekiel Elliott to bounce back from uncharacteristically only having 4 runs of at least 20 yards, which was last year fewest among the top 10 rushers in the NFL. Now Zeke, he's going to run behind a dominant run-blocking offensive line that also only gave up the second fewest sacks in the league. But unfortunately, the big dogs up front, they will be without 3-time All-Pro center Travis Frederick after his early retirement at the age of 29. On the defensive side, Mike Nolan is back in the league as the team's new defensive coordinator. His strongest unit, definitely that defensive line. Everson Griffin is now here. So is Aldon Smith on an extremely team-friendly deal, and he's ready to prove himself. So if those two can take the Cowboys' edge rush to new heights, and maybe DeMarcus Lawrence can bounce back from a very quiet year of just 5 sacks in 16 games, I think they'll be good this year. And when you take those edge rushers and combine them with Dontari Poe, Antoine Woods, and then third-round pick Neville Gallimore plugging the middle and rotating, should make things a lot easier for a weaker secondary that's going to rely on second-round pick and a rookie, Trayvon Diggs, and then guys like Anthony Brown and Chidobe Awuzie to fill the shoes of Byron Jones, who's now in Miami. Now, safety, another area of concern for this team, which is why it shocked me, honestly, that they cut HaHa Clinton-Dix before the season started. But again, if the pass rush can do its job, maybe it helps things a lot in that weak part of the defense. Dallas does have enough talent to where their expectations should be nothing less than 11 wins and an NFC East title. Now, I don't personally see 11 wins, but I do see 10 and them winning and taking this division. A 5-4 start to the season features non-division losses to the Rams, Steelers, and then non-division wins over Atlanta and Seattle. And I actually hate saying this, but as things come down to the wire, I have the Dallas Cowboys edging out the Eagles with a 10-6 record and an NFC East title. Now let's take things over to the AFC West. During his Broncos playing days, John Elway made playing like a Hall of Fame quarterback look simple. But as Broncos GM, he's whiffed at the quarterback position ever since Peyton Manning left. But Elway seems to be all in on Drew Lock as Denver's quarterback of the future after he helped the team win 4 of their final 5 games as a rookie. And in year 2, Luck will have a new offensive coordinator in Pat Shurmur, whose West Coast offense promises to bring more 3 wide receiver sets, creativity, and downfield throws. And then to help with that vision, in comes first-round draft pick Jerry Jeudy from Alabama, who I thought was the best wideout in an absolutely stacked draft. They even doubled down at that position by taking KJ Hamler out of Penn State in the second round, so those two with Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick, they'll be the ones running the majority of the routes. And then also in the passing game, you got a valuable guy in the versatile running back, Phillip Lindsay, whose quickness out of the backfield makes things really interesting now with the signing of Melvin Gordon, who fills the role of a more physical backfield running mate. And then now with those two guys running the ball, you look at who's up front. I do see a weakness there with the tackle position. The weakness is obviously with left tackle Garrett Bowles not living up to the first-round pick hype over on the blind side, and then over on the opposite side, starting right tackle Jawan James opted out due to COVID concerns, which creates another major problem for Locke. Now, on the other side of the ball, even though A.J. Bouye is coming off a down year, he might be a better fit in Vic Fangio's read and react zone coverage schemes than the recently departed Chris Harris Jr., who's now with the Chargers. But what you can expect is major changes with the way this team is pressuring the quarterback. Derek Wolf's not there anymore at the end, and while Denver's hoping that a newly acquired defensive tackle in Jarrell Casey can show them that trading a 7th-round pick for a 5-time Pro Bowler is a genius move, the biggest crushing blow to this team is that Von Miller's season ends before he can even start. So that dynamic duo of him and Bradley Chubb is nothing more but a pipe dream and something that Broncos fans were looking forward to but won't get. Now, sorting out how the 3 teams finished behind the Chiefs was tough for me, but now that Von Miller's out for the year, it makes it easier for me to pick them to finish in last at 5-11. And that's not because this is not a good team, but just because, again, I think they're going to have a little bit of hard times with the tackle position and not having Von Miller. Now, the Broncos have been looking for quarterbacks for a while. The same could not be said about the Chargers for years because they had Phillip Rivers holding it down forever. 2020 is the year of change, though, and the Chargers have been hit with it in a big way. Phillip Rivers was one of the strongest connections San Diego had to the now Los Angeles Chargers, and with him now gone, it almost feels like a completely new era for the Bolts, who, by the way, are going to have some really cool, one of the coolest one-of-a-kind uniforms in the NFL for years to come. It's just too bad that they can't get their one-of-a-kind safety, Derwin James. That guy is not healthy again, and knee surgery will end his season before it can even start also. So that's tough, but offensively, you're now looking at a team, again, without Phillip Rivers. Who's their quarterback going to be? Well, Justin Herbert drafted 6th overall in the draft to be the eventual long-term option at quarterback. But he's a little raw in his development, and without a preseason, it's a no-brainer to roll with Tyrod Taylor to start. Tyrod's got some solid weapons around him, with Keenan Allen being locked up on a new deal, and then tight end Hunter Henry in the middle of the field, and then the versatile plug-and-play running back Austin Eckler kind of moving around all over the field with his type of playing style. But the often injured Mike Williams is now dealing with a shoulder injury, and that type of upper body injury as a wide receiver is something that tends to linger instead of fully healing in that year, though they are quite optimistic about Mike Williams and his ability to play early on, so good for the Chargers there. The Chargers are going to be a run-first team with their zone scheme, so this offseason, it's going to be something you're looking at to shape up their season success, because it's going to really fall on this offensive line doing well up front. But right now, I would say blindside pass protection seems to be an area of concern without Russell Okung returning to play that left tackle spot. Now, defensively, they will benefit from having the versatile playmaking Chris Harris Jr. play 2 roles as both an inside and outside corner. But again, this is a defense that loses Derwin, so their secondary is still pretty good, even though they lose Derwin, but they'll be all right. And then Kenneth Murray Jr., I think he'll contribute right away on defense as a rookie. And then you look at the Chargers, they finished in last in their division last year, not because they were a bad football team, but because they just couldn't win the close games. And finishing in last in your division comes with the perks of having a last place schedule. And in 2020, the Chargers, they've only got 5 games against teams that finished above 500. Now, my win-loss projection for these guys looks kind of funny, but I have them going on 5 different streaks in the season, 2-0 to start. After that, 0-4, and then 3 straight wins followed by 3 straight losses, 3 more wins in a row, and then a loss to the Chiefs to finish 8-8. And while I think the Chargers will beat the Raiders twice, I feel like it won't be enough for them to be ahead of the now Las Vegas Raiders in the standings, and allow me to explain why. There's something brewing with the Raiders. It's not done yet, but things are coming along. It's not going to be an ideal starting year for year 1 in a new city without fans in your brand new stadium, but this is 2020 and we shouldn't be shocked at anything. But the Raiders are in Vegas, and it just feels right because a Raider is a pirate on the move with no regard for enemy territory. They rob, they steal, and gamble anyways. They do what they want. So while I feel for Oakland losing out on its team for the second time, a shiny new spot in Sin City is perfect for a fan base that will follow its team basically anywhere. And there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Raider fan this year. Yes, the Antonio Brown experiment fell apart before it could even begin, but the Raiders were a 7-9 team that showed a lot of promise last year. This team went from having one of the worst offensive lines to a top 10 unit when healthy, and Josh Jacobs, he set a franchise rookie rushing record along a surprise year from tight end Darren Waller. And now Waller's going to have some help with Jason Witten coming in. So all eyes are going to be on Derek Carr, who's been a very good quarterback when healthy and given weapons. But the thing is, this team's motto, it's just win, baby. So Derek's production, it's going to have to step up as the offense improves, Or else we could be looking at his last season in silver and black if John Gruden and Mike Mayock start to get impatient, or if they feel like starting from scratch with a rookie will be a cheaper way for the Raiders to open up their window for longer and compete with the Chiefs and make a playoff push. But the biggest move of their splashy secondary was helping in getting Damon Arnett to play the opposite side of Trayvon Mullen. The fact that they released Prince Amukamara before the season even started tells me they're confident with his status as a rookie first-round pick. And then I would say over at the linebacker spot, that was another splashy set of moves they made, bringing in Corey Littleton from the Rams to play inside linebacker. Him and then linebacker Nick Kwiatkowski's newly signed defensive tackle Malik Collins, they're going to be tasked with revamping the middle of a defense that already features promising young D linemen in Max Crosby, Cleveland Farrell, and Mo Hurst. And they're coached by Rod Marinelli, so shout out to Cal Lou, the defensive line coach. Rod Marinelli, Cal Lou guy. But all four of the Raiders' primetime games will be in Allegiant Stadium, starting with the Saints on Monday night, which will be the NFL's first game in Las Vegas. So I'm excited about that, obviously. I do feel like the roll of the Vegas dice ends up with them winning that game somehow. So 2-0 to start, a win against the Bills, sandwiched in between losses to the Patriots and Chiefs. And then out of the bye week, 3 losses to the Bucks, Browns, and Chargers, followed by a strong 6-2 finish to a season that puts them at 9-7 and in second in the AFC West. And that might just do it in a 17 playoff format, which I think they sneak in just by a hair, make it in the playoffs, and in Vegas, all it takes is a little bit of luck after that. Now, the reality is, though, that nobody in this AFC West has any business taking Kansas City's spot as top dog. Those guys, they're defending Super Bowl champions for a reason. They open up as 15 of 16 games favorites. Patrick Mahomes got paid 10 years and $503 million. All of that stuff for a good reason. They're not here to mess around. They're strong at every single offensive position, and even with Damian Williams opting out, the running back position seems to be just fine. The fact that they were able to draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of LSU just feels like cheating, honestly. And now he enters a video game offense that beats people with speed all across the field. There's also a perfect union between quarterback, head coach, and front office on this team. All three of them are in sync with Andy Reid and Mahomes, and having them all locked up long-term really sets the footprints for this team to try to become a dynasty. And they're out to prove that they can do that. But in this day and age, repeating is not easy at all, even when you bring back just about everyone as the Chiefs are. But they aren't going to have Laurent Duvernay-Tardif at their starting right guard spot. He's a solid offensive lineman for them who chose instead to help curb the spread of COVID-19 as his doctor. So good job for him. But the other spot of concern for this Chiefs team is they had the 6th worst rushing defense, allowing 128.2 yards per game. And at linebacker, their play must improve as well. So even though they did have the pass defense that was money last year, Tyrann Mathieu and crew, they will be without Bashaud Breeland for the first 4 games to start the season because he had his substance abuse violation. But he'll be back, though, and honestly, when he comes back, they'll probably be either 4-0 or 3-1. I've got them at 3-1, losing not to the Ravens, but actually in a surprise game to the Chargers in Week 2 in a tough division battle. I think their 3 other losses probably come at the hands of Buffalo in Week 6, and then back-to-back weeks, with the Raiders in Week 11, and then on Sunday night to the Bucs. So overall, though, 12-4 doesn't sound so bad. I don't think any of the teams in this division will win more than 10 games. And with a top 3 seed in the AFC, the quest to defend their title absolutely begins once again. And we know the Chiefs know how to win big games. Pat Mahomes, real special player. He won MVP in his first year as a starter, followed it up with the Super Bowl MVP in year 2, and who knows what's in store for year 3. And if this is the beginning of his prime, look out everybody else. Now, if you want to know what the opposite of the Kansas City Chiefs looks like, look no further than the Jacksonville Jaguars. This was an organization that was 1 win away from reaching the Super Bowl just a few years ago. But that was then, and this is now. They lost a lot of players in the offseason. Nick Foles, Leonard Fournette on offense, and then defensively, who didn't they lose? In the secondary, they said peace out to A.J. Bouye and Ronnie Harrison. And then from the defensive line, they're without Calais Campbell, Marcel Darius, and Yannick Ngakoue. So for as many players as they lost this offseason, believe me, I think they're going to lose even more football games. They're going to be so painfully horrible with what is easily the worst roster in all of the NFL. 24 rookies and second-year players. That means expectations in Jacksonville really aren't going to be that high. So maybe that buys GM Dave Caldwell and head coach Doug Marrone some more time. The new play caller in town is Jay Gruden. And as offensive coordinator, the guy's going to have really little to work with. You got DJ Chark coming off a Pro Bowl appearance, but he is the only returning player with any Pro Bowl experience. You do have newly signed tight end Tyler Eifert, who was once a Pro Bowler, but he's been hurt for so long that nobody really knows what to expect from him, though I think that he's actually going to be pretty good. Last year, it was Minshew Mania. It was awesome, but Mr. Mustache running for his life in a game of backyard football with DJ Chark and a broken down Tyler Eifert just isn't enough to scare any defenses. I would say, though, if there is a bright spot, it's that I expect Jags' second-year defensive end Josh Allen to have a breakout year. And not the Josh Allen in Buffalo. The Jags have their own Josh Allen, who quietly had 10.5 sacks last year, which was more than Max Crosby and Nick Bosa. But yeah, really, other than that, nothing to work with. They should be underdogs in every single game, honestly. 0-16, I think it sounds like a reality, but I'll be nice and give them a fun division win at home against the Texans. Say it's week 9. I think Minshew, yeah, he's a fun player, but I'm not sure if he's a franchise quarterback. He's really here being set up to fail so that the team's next quarterback, who probably goes to Clemson, ends up on the team. And that's going to be Trevor Lawrence. So another Clemson quarterback in their division now, because Deshaun Watson, the quarterback for the Texans, just days before kickoff was extended long-term by this Houston team. It was a no-brainer move for them, but with the moves they've been making, you'd think they probably don't have any brains at all. Now, I don't know how Bill O'Brien is still the head coach, and I especially don't know how he doubles as the team's general manager. But nevertheless, he is. And he was forced to trade away a top 2 wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins because of a fractured relationship. And in return, he got a banged-up David Johnson on a bad contract. But, maybe he can prove himself this year. So instead of throwing the ball to Hopkins, this year, Deshaun's going to be throwing the ball to Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb, Kenny Stills, and Devin Fuller, which is a good group that unfortunately still has an injury history of their own. Now, this offensive line, it struggled to keep Watson upright in the pocket in the past, but I thought they were decent enough last year, and some of the sacks, honestly, were because Watson held the football too long. But then, obviously, the two teams in this division, it's obviously the Texans and the Colts who had the most talent, but Deshaun Watson and J.J. Watt, maybe the most special players, and they cover up a lot of the mistakes for this Texans team. You just can't ask them to do everything all the time. Watt is going to need more from that pass rush. That help on the edge is going to really help him out a lot, though I do think he'll get some from a very strong linebacker group headlined by Zach Cunningham and Bernardrick McKinney. They got all 4 of those linebackers back, so good for them there. And then Bradley Roby and Justin Reed are solid, but they're going to need more help from the others in the secondary if they want to be a formidable team stopping the pass. Now, their season honestly will depend on how they open up with that 8-game stretch they have to start the season. They'll face 5 playoff teams and a Steelers team who should honestly be better with Ben this year. Fortunately, they'll have the rebuilding Jags twice, but even then, they still pose a threat, being a familiar division rival. Now, they've been AFC South champions 4 of the last 5 years, but Tennessee, they're surging, and the Colts are actually now the team that's better equipped to make a run now that Houston is looking like a team that has no identity with players constantly leaving. So I think the Texans finish in third at 7-9. Their 3 losses early on against the Chiefs, Ravens, and Steelers have them starting 0-3. And then after consecutive wins over the Vikings and Jags, I think they lose to Tennessee, then beat Green Bay, but before unthinkably losing to the Jaguars out of the bye week, and then this team goes like, what is going on? But then, maybe a couple nice wins against Cleveland, New England, and then Indy coupled up with a gimme win over the Bengals in Week 16, I think it puts them at 7-9 in my book, simply because of the magic of Deshaun Watson. Now, if Watson had a GM like the Colts did, then maybe things would be a different story. The Colts are one of the smarter teams in the league. Last offseason, they went on an expensive shopping spree, putting together a roster that was definitely built to win the division. But then all of a sudden, Andrew Luck drops a bomb on them that, he's unexpectedly retiring, and then injuries to T.Y. Hilton and others really derailed any of their hopes. So to get better for 2020, they traded a first-round pick for DeForest Buckner, who is an absolute dog and a great player up front that definitely addresses one of their needs. However, I don't think it's unfair to say that Buckner probably won't shine as much as he did last year because, the Colts don't have a D-line like the Niners did. But overall, Buckner joins Darius Leonard in a Colts defense that should improve in 2020, so long as they can get consistent production from the secondary. Now, Kenny Moore, one of the best nickel corners in the game, but more will be needed from the corners and from the young safety duo of Malik Hooker and Khari Willis, who will be without key sub Marvell Tell from USC and Crespi Carmelite High School. Offensively, a reunion of sorts with new quarterback Phillip Rivers, who was coached by Frank Reich when he was an assistant with the Chargers. And then Phil, he's going to have Marlon Mack and Jonathan Taylor in the backfield, and that's a solid duo right there, running behind a guy in Quentin Nelson who is really once in a generation when it comes to the offensive line, and a guard that anchors a unit that's just super tough up front. The only thing, the Colts last year, 30th in passing yards, and Phillip Rivers, he definitely looked his age last year, and what was for sure a down year for him. So the passing game, it could be a concern or a question mark, something that you don't know of to be certain. But I really, really do like the fact that they brought in Michael Pittman Jr. from USC to be a physical wideout next to T.Y. Hilton. Now, those two probably will be good enough for Phillip Rivers to get things done and be a team that's at the top, but not the number one team in the division, because their schedule isn't all that easy. In fact, one of the 11 teams who will play a league high of 7 playoff teams. Their ceiling, I think, is as Super Bowl contenders making a deep playoff run with a veteran quarterback in Rivers, but their floor is in the cellar of this division. And me personally, I've got them going 8-8. Road losses to the Bears, Browns, Lions, Texans, Raiders, and Steelers, and then home losses to the Ravens and Titans. 8-8, not good enough to make the playoffs, unfortunately, for the Colts, but I might be wrong there. The real story, though, of this AFC South was last year's Tennessee Titans. What a ride. Start off 2-4 with Marcus Mariota, and then Ryan Tannehill takes over, earns the Comeback Player of the Year award because he helped the team win 7 of their last 10 to earn a wildcard spot. And then the magic, it carries into the postseason. You got a pair of road wins, ending Tom Brady's reign in New England, and then you knock the MVP in Lamar Jackson and his one-seeded Ravens out of the playoffs entirely before they can even win a game. So they were ultimately just one win short of a Super Bowl trip, losing to Kansas City, but the pieces are there for Tennessee to get back to exactly where they want to be, and then maybe even farther than that. They lock up Tannehill, locked up Derrick Henry for 4 years and $50 million, after a season in which Henry led the NFL in carries, yards, and touchdowns. So there will be people questioning, though, whether it was a fluke year and whether Tannehill and Derrick Henry locking them up made sense, especially with Derrick Henry having a lot of miles on his body. Would that be the right move? We'll see. But for me, in the immediate future, I think these moves are definitely going to pay off in a major way, because this is a team who averaged 5 yards a carry on the ground offensively, and while they lost Dion Lewis, they picked up Darrington Evans in the 3rd round to be their new complementary change of pace back. And then A.J. Brown did his thing as a rookie wideout with 605 yards and 5 touchdowns in his last 6 games. So he looks like a number 1 wideout, but the question really is who's going to be the number 2. You got Adam Humphries in the slot, but Corey Davis has been a bust so far. Now, the good thing is the Titans, with their offense, they can continue to use their tight ends and play action like they did. And with Jonnu Smith, they do have one of the best tight ends after the catch. Now, defensively, they'll miss Jarrell Casey, but Jeffrey Simmons looked great as a rookie as soon as he was healthy. And then Logan Ryan, he's gone. But that secondary, they still got an all-pro safety in Kelvin Byard. And over at corner, they're going to need Malcolm Butler, Adoree Jackson, and second-round pick Christian Fulton from LSU to be better than what they were last year. And Vic Beasley signing a one-year, $9.5 million deal was supposed to be the key offseason move, but the real help to the Titans' pass rush comes with Jadeveon Clowney signing a one-year deal. That's a guy who, with motivation issues, might be a concern, but he's playing for a long-term contract. So I think the Titans are hoping that the results Clowney brings are more productive than they are on the opposite side of that. And his disruption on that defensive line will be huge. I do think this team starts off 2-1, but things get really interesting because by week 4, their schedule becomes an absolute gift from the NFL schedule makers. Because from week 4 through week 10, the Titans only leave Tennessee once. And their one and only road game in that time span comes off the heels of their week 7 bye. So out of the bye, get this, they travel into Cincinnati for week 8. And we know that beating the Bengals off a bye should be very easy. And then their next road game will be in week 11 at Baltimore. That's a tough one. But the good news for Tennessee is that it comes after a very winnable week 10 Thursday night game. So it means they'll have 10 days to prepare for a Ravens team that they already beat on the road in the playoffs last year. So I think this is a 12-4 team at the end of the day with key home wins over Pittsburgh and Buffalo, some gimme wins from the crappy teams they have on their schedule, and a surprising road win against the Ravens. Now, the way the AFC North looks is kind of interesting. Young quarterbacks in 3 of the 4 cities, and the most recent one is Joe Burrow arriving to Cincinnati as the newest face of the franchise. And honestly just felt like destiny with the Ohio kid to wind up here in Cincinnati. He hops into an offense with a dynamic wideout group that gets A.J. Green to return after missing all of 2019, and then adds T. Higgins out of Clemson to go along with Tyler Boyd. Then Joe Mixon, a fantastic running back who creates his own running lanes, but as a whole, the Bengals offensive line doesn't do a lot to help him out. The good news, though, they'll be going into the season with a 2019 first-round pick in Jonah Williams at tackle, who is looking to finally make his NFL debut after being injured all of last year. Now, establishing the run, that was a problem of theirs, but it wasn't as bad of a problem as it was stopping the run. They were the worst run defense in the league last year, but knowing they'd have a rookie quarterback on a cheap deal, they spent some good money reshaping their defense by signing DJ Reader to join a defensive line that already includes Carlos Dunlap and Geno Atkins. And even though they've completely remade their secondary by bringing in Von Bell to play safety and then signing a pair of former Vikings in Mackenzie Alexander and Trey Waynes from Minnesota, Waynes, he's not going to be playing because of a torn pec, so this might be a relatively unreliable group of corners. So there are some games to be excited for, though, if you're a Bengals fan and a football fan in general. Week 11 in Washington, you got the number 1 overall pick in Joe Burrow versus the number 2 overall pick in Chase Young. And then in week 13, it's the draft class's top 2 quarterbacks, Burrow versus Tua in Miami, which by that time I'm thinking Tua is the guy. So I do expect the Bengals to be an improved offense in 2020 that can compete against teams. But at the end of the day, the talent and physicality of this AFC North and their opponents they're going to have, likely too much to overcome in 2020 to the point that it will very obviously be 5 straight years of missing the playoffs. Now, they'll be able to beat Jacksonville in week 4. They will have improved by week 12 enough to be able to win a home game against the Giants in week 12. And then my fun win of the year is a pick in week 15, a home win against the Steelers on Monday night. It's a division game, and why can't they win that? They can do it. Those wins right there put them at 3-13, which is 1 win better than what they were last year. And I think that keeps Ohio area football fans excited about what's in store. And then elsewhere in Ohio, you got the Cleveland Browns. And last preseason, the Browns, they were that popular, very sexy pick to win the AFC North with all their firepower they had. And though it was should have been obvious before it happened, it never materialized into wins because Cleveland's influx of weapons and incompetence at head coach in 2019 just created confusion around their offensive identity. even though it was Nick Chubb averaging 4.8 yards per carry, leading the league in yards up until the last week of the season. So, new head coach Kevin Stefanski, I do think he changes things a little bit. He seems to be really serious about implementing a power running scheme around the skill sets of Chubb and Hunt, and they even brought in a fullback to make things easier. Then they signed Austin Hooper, so between him and David Njoku and the other tight ends on this roster, expect more 2 tight end personnel groupings that leave probably Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry both on the field as the 2 wide receivers. But instead of forcibly shoving those guys into an offense that chucks it around all the time, I am expecting them to be dedicated to Jarvis underneath and Odell over the top in the play-action passing game more so than they were last year. And then by signing Jack Conklin and drafting Jedrick Willis from Alabama in the first round to be the 2 new tackles, the Browns are showing us that it really is up to Baker Mayfield from here to be the quarterback they drafted him to be. And then defensively, Cleveland's problem was that they couldn't stop a nosebleed. They allowed 5 yards per carry on the ground, largely because they had a league high of 140 missed tackles. And with Christian Kirksey and Joe Schobert both gone, it's very obvious they got holes at the linebacker spot, especially on the inside. But Myles Garrett's reinstated, reinvigorated, and on the hunt to lead the league in sacks and again show us why he's a perennial candidate to win Defensive Player of the Year. And then Sheldon Richardson helps with his interior dominance. So with the NFL's easiest first half of the 2020 season based off of win percentage from last year, Cleveland's opportunity to push for a playoff spot and end a league-leading 17-year playoff drought really depends on how strong they can start. Now, I have them going 5-3, winning the easy ones, but losing road games to Baltimore, Dallas, and Pittsburgh. And then after the bye, I think they go 2-6, and that 7-9 season, it ends with a Week 17 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the fact that this Pittsburgh team managed to win 8 games with Devlin Hodges and Mason Rudolph at quarterback tells me 2 things. Number 1, 2019 was Mike Tomlin's most impressive year as a coach. And number 2, the defense is elite. And Pittsburgh is a blitz-heavy team with a ferocious pass rush, so it really is no wonder that the most takeaways came from a defense that then added Minkah Fitzpatrick to combine with Devin Bush's 108 tackles and 35 combined sacks from TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, and Cameron Hayward. So getting Stephon Tuitt back from an injury, that should really only help the defense in doing that kind of stuff again. So I will say that defense is strong, but if there is a weakness, it'd be at the inside linebacker spot next to Devin Bush. And if the Steelers can't get decent production from whoever it is they call upon to step up, it could mean a lot more nickel defenses from Pittsburgh. And that would especially hurt them against run-heavy teams within their division. So can they put up a repeat performance on defense in 2020? And does a little help from a healthy Big Ben put an end to a 2-year playoff drought? Well, Juju Smith-Schuster and James Conner are certainly hoping that, because those two went off for career years in 2018, but Big Ben's elbow injury definitely slashed their productivity big time last year. So I don't know, maybe they'll improve and the Steelers look like a really good team. They do have the easiest final 8 games in 2020 based off win percentage, 391. That should be really easy for them to take care of business there. So if they play up to their full potential, I mean, I think they could take it down to the wire with Baltimore for the number 1 spot in the North. But I do think they finish just behind the Ravens in second place. I just look at the Ravens and ask myself, what happens when a 14-2 team with the reigning MVP and the league's best rushing attack bring in almost everybody back from last year and follow it up with the NFL's easiest schedule? I mean, you'd have to assume it means more dominance is on the way. And just how dominant was Baltimore's ball control offense? Well, for starters, the Ravens had 5 scoring drives of at least 9 minutes last year, and no other team in the league had more than 1. Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram each ran for over 1,000 yards last year, and now the running game gets even scarier by drafting Ohio State running back J.K. Dobbins. So imagine those guys with 6 games against Washington, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, and Cleveland, which are 4 of the worst run defenses from 2019. Should be a lot more dominance from the run game. Even though longtime guard Marshall Yanda retired, the Ravens should be just as good, if not better, in that running game. And obviously, the passing yards, not really there, but yeah, this is an inexperienced wide receiver group. But I don't really think Baltimore cares because Lamar is still very efficient throwing the ball. And all he did last year was throw for an NFL best 36 touchdowns against just 6 picks, despite having no wide receiver with more than 600 receiving yards. And then plus, if the offense stalls out, well, they lean on the league's best kicker in Justin Tucker, who can bail them out for what is essentially an automatic 3 points. So then on the other side of the ball, the Ravens' top 5 defense last year, it will look a little bit different. Earl Thomas is gone, but they didn't cut him without a good reason. Their secondary is still outstanding, and it was actually Chuck Clark who led this Ravens team in tackles, playing the safety position opposite of Thomas. They're going to need to do a better job of sacking the quarterback, but bringing in Calais Campbell should help. They will be leaning on some young linebackers as well, but I think LSU's Patrick Queen going to the Ravens late in the first round was another one of the steals, and I think he thrives in Baltimore's defense to the point that winning this year's Defensive Rookie of the Year could be a possibility for him. I do think Pittsburgh, they probably do have the best defense in this division, but, with Big Ben, yeah, they'll make things much closer. But to me, the Ravens are still the more talented football team from top to bottom, and I think they finished 13-3. I'll say there are 3 losses at the hands of Kansas City in Week 3, the Titans in Week 11, and then Pittsburgh in Week 12 on Thanksgiving. Not much to be thankful for if you're a Jets fan, I'll tell you that much. This is a team that hasn't made the playoffs since 2010. Last year, the Jets had one of the league's best defenses, but it went to waste because of how historically bad they were on offense. Sam Darnold catching mono really sunk this team's season before it could even get started. He started off 1-7, then went 6-2 over the last 8 to finish 7-9. So it is a sign that maybe the team can take the next leap if Darnold can stay healthy and keep progressing as a quarterback. There's no guaranteeing that because Darnold is too often running for his life, too much back in there in the pocket. Credit to the Jets, they did address their interior offensive line problems in free agency and also drafted a monster of a human and being. And Mekhi Becton from Louisville, that guy is massive. So raw a little bit, but the upside is definitely there. Then Baylor wide receiver Denzel Mims is going to be a top target on day 1 for Darnold. And that to me is a sign of how little depth the Jets have at wideout. The offense, it should be running through Le'Veon Bell. Just he and head coach Adam Gase don't have that great of a relationship, and Gase needs to figure out how to make the most of a guy whose talents are very obvious as a dynamic runner and a receiver. But Le'Veon's future with the Jets going to depend on how well he performs this year. They got to average more than the 3.3 yards per carry they averaged last season. Defensively, they're fast, aggressive, and really good against the run. In fact, they finished second in rushing yards. That was in 2019. 2020, CJ Mosley opted out, and Jamal Adams wanted out. And so with both those two not around, things are going to look a lot different on defense. Losing Adams especially is a blow to a team that's got the worst group of corners in the NFL. His 6.5 sacks don't just show up out of thin air either. Now, the Jets play 8 teams that finish above 500, which is tied for the second most in the NFL with 4 other teams. So I have them picking up their first win in Week 5 against the Cardinals when they, in Arizona, make their trip to the East Coast. So a win on the road against the Chargers can follow, but then 4 straight losses to teams like the Bills, Chiefs, Patriots, and even the Dolphins, I think, sink this team even more. They beat the Dolphins, I think, out of the bye, lose 3 more, then beat the Browns and lose to the Patriots. So I got them finishing 4-12 and in last place. Last place is where the Dolphins finished last year in a season where they weren't good at anything at all. But if one thing is for sure after last year, it's that Brian Flores is the man for the job, and this looks like a team that's on the upswing of a rebuild. Now, they made a lot of moves this offseason, headlined by bringing in Tua as the quarterback of the future, but without a preseason, he'll be getting a Harvard education with a major in Fitzmagic. And with Tua's injury history, it especially makes sense for a team whose offensive line is absolutely the worst in the league, and turning to first and second round picks to start at both tackle positions without any live preseason reps. Now, crazy enough, Ryan Fitzpatrick was this team's leading rusher last year, but I doubt that happens again. Jordan Howard and Matt Breida should split carries and make Miami respectable on the ground. And last year's defense, they gave up the most points in the league. But in comes Shaq Lawson, Kyle Van Noy, and Emmanuel Ogbah to improve the pass rush, and then the secondary gets Byron Jones on the opposite side of Xavier Howard. The thing is, for as much as the Dolphins are making moves, the reality is there were far too many holes to fill in just one offseason. 4 playoff teams in their first 5 certainly means the Dolphins struggle out of the gate, but not enough to desperately turn to Tua, because this team knows they are still a year away from being a real threat. Week 10 at home versus the Jets feels like the time to turn to Tua, and it makes sense because the way the schedule works, he'd get a bye week the following week to evaluate his performance, and then, weirdly enough, another crack at the Jets in Week 12. So if you're looking at a contending team in Miami, trying to find one, go ahead and check out the Heat. The Marlins, I guess they've surprised teams with the way they've competed in baseball. And, I think the Dolphins will too, even though finishing 4-12 definitely keeps them well out of the playoffs. But I don't think anyone in that organization has a 4-win mindset. 4 wins would be less than last year's total, but their schedule is tougher than like it was last year. So there are other really things you could be looking at, like other barometers for success to keep an eye on. I think the future is bright, though, and pieces are being put in place for them to win later. And win later, though, it's a thought process that never goes through Bill Belichick's mind. It's always been win now with him and the Patriots, even in the midst of change. The Tom Brady era is officially over. I'm not sure if it's going to feel real until kickoff, honestly, but it is. And in comes Cam Newton stepping in to replace him. Now, it's going to be weird watching the Patriots without Tom, but he's not the only familiar face who's not going to return. They'll be without longtime offensive line coach Dante Scarnecchia, and it's an offensive line that will be asked to protect Cam Newton without starting tackle Marcus Cannon, a guy who opted out due to COVID-19 health concerns. Now, that won't make it any easier for Sony Michel to bounce back from a sophomore slump. He only averaged 3.7 yards per carry, though, he should bump that up, I think. The good news is that on the other side of the ball, they'll bring back Defensive Player of the Year Stephon Gilmore, who was instrumental in the Patriots being the league's #1 defense last year. But also, guys like Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins, and Danny Shelton, they were big parts too, and they left the team in free agency. And then guys like Dante Hightower and Patrick Chung, who are just a few more of the Patriots' league-high number of COVID-19 opt-outs, not going to return to that defense. So they'll still be good, but just don't expect a historic performance like they had last year. But there is a reason they'll still play 5 primetime games this year, which is tied for most of the NFL. And that's because last time that I checked, the Patriots still compete in the AFC East, where they won 11 straight titles. And they're an exciting team with Cam Newton and then a guy in Bill Belichick who just knows how to win. They got Cam Newton now on a team-friendly deal. Just the only question is going to be whether or not the offensive weapons are good enough with that kind of receiver depth and unproven tight ends. Now, it's hard to imagine the Patriots winning under 10 games, but it could be possible given the fact that they have the NFL's toughest schedule according to last year's win percentage. I would see this team winning more games, but unfortunately, getting out of the gate slow might happen. I see them going 9-7, but with that gauntlet of a schedule, Cam Newton's stable play as a comeback player of the year candidate does enough to earn them a wild card spot. Now, the Patriots are almost widely favored every single year to win that division, but things are different. This isn't quite a passing of the torch, I'd say, so don't write the obituary on the Pats because New England is still really good. But Buffalo has been around for some time now, and they're a franchise that is definitely heading in the right direction. The question is, how much better can Josh Allen be at quarterback And now with Stephon Diggs arriving to town, is it time that he really takes the next step? Buffalo was pathetic passing the football last year with just 201 passing yards per game. But Allen's continuity with Cole Beasley out of the slot and then John Brown on the outside should improve. And then you bring in Stephon Diggs as the ultimate prize of the offseason. So there really is no excuse for Josh Allen to not be better in the air, especially because the Bills need him to be more than a guy with a strong arm who just makes highlight plays. If, that's going to be the case, they're not going to return to the playoffs. They definitely need more from Josh Allen. The good news for Buffalo's offense is they run the ball so well behind a very dependable and athletic offensive line. Devin Singletary averaged 5 yards a pop on the ground, and then Josh Allen made some magic happen with his feet too. And then the move I really liked was adding third-round running back Zach Moss, who was the Pac-12's Offensive Player of the Year and now becomes the Thunder to Devin Singletary's Lightning. Over on the other side of the ball, Buffalo's been a top 3 defense for 2 straight years with that base 4-3 zone cover scheme of theirs. And even though guys like Jordan Phillips and Lorenzo Alexander are gone, they've set the foundation for talented young guys like Ed Oliver and Tremaine Edmonds, who I expect to really hold down the front 7 with a solid secondary in the back with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde at safety, and then Tre'Davious White earning an extension as one of the best corners in football. The lone question mark is going to be with Josh Norman playing corner on the other side. He hasn't been good in a while, but the Bills aren't paying him much and are hoping maybe a change of scenery can help things. And Sean McDermott's a great coach, so it could happen. This team might be better this year, but it also could be tough for them to improve their record because they play the AFC West and the NFC West. So that means they'll play the 2 Super Bowl teams from last year and then other tough teams in those divisions as well. Now, they played 3 games on a short week this year, and their last 5 with 3 primetime games. So a 10-6 team last year, I think they'll be 10-6 again, but this time as AFC East division champions. And so looking at the playoff picture, I got the Saints at the 1 seed, Niners at the 2 seed, Cowboys at the 3 seed, and Vikings at the 4 seed as the division winners. And then the 2 wildcard teams out of the NFC West would be the Rams and the Seahawks at 11-5 and 10-6, with Tom Brady's Tampa Bay Bucks sneaking in as the 7 seed. So then Baltimore at 13-3 in the AFC, with Tennessee at 12-4, Kansas City at 12-4, Buffalo at 10-6, and then the Pittsburgh Steelers as a wildcard team at 11-5, with New England just barely making it in 9-7, and then the Vegas Raiders at that 7 seed in a magic season somehow getting in. But over in the playoffs, I think it's kind of chalky. I'm going with the Chiefs to pick up 2 wins. But then as the defending champs, I think they do get sent home by Baltimore because just like Mahomes, Lamar has that opportunity to go from MVP to Super Bowl MVP in a year. And I think he does do it by downing Drew Brees in his final game with the Saints and in a Super Bowl win for the Ravens. And that's my team that I'm going with this year. Now, it all depends on health, but I do think Lamar is the guy that is exactly who we think he is. And this team, it all depends on if they're healthy, but they've got a real shot. As far as the awards go, I think Russell Wilson is not a guy who people really appreciate to the extent that they should. He's like that infomercial flex tape that you slap on a leaky bucket of water. I think this guy wins MVP. Clyde Edwards-Helaire over in Kansas City, Offensive Rookie of the Year, and then Chase Young over with Washington. I think those guys are as well positioned as anybody to win Rookie of the Year. And then Aaron Donald on defense, I'm going with the Rams to be another dominating force and get that 3rd Defensive Player of the Year award for him. While over in the NFC West, I think the Offensive Player of the Year goes to DeAndre Hopkins with Kyler Murray throwing him a bunch of passes in a wide-open Cliff Kingsbury offense. And then Comeback Player of the Year, I really hope that it's Cam Newton because the guy was kind of chewed up, spit off, and discarded in a way that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So I really hope he can do that. I think Executive of the Year goes to Tampa Bay for their moves. And then Mike Vrabel, because I got the Titans going 12-4, I think he wins Coach of the Year there. So, I mean, I could be wrong on a lot of these. I probably will be wrong on a lot of these, but If I'm right, this is exactly where you heard it. If I'm wrong, don't worry. I'll take it on the chin. But I'm right more than I'm wrong. You guys know this. But it's the Good as Gould show with Jay Gould.